So Louise is the author of Tainted Love, a Bipolar Memoir, a Shetty-certified life coach, and host of the Unmasking Sobriety and Mental Health podcast. Through her writing and voice, she explores the grey areas of bipolar disorder, addiction, love, and identity with unflinching honesty. Diagnosed with bipolar, type 1, after years of misdiagnosis and self-destruction, Louise found sobriety in 2021, a turning point that reshaped her life and creative purpose. Her memoir, spanning 15 years and 4 defining relationships, examines the complexity of mental illness, the search for stability, and the possibility of healing without perfection. In addition to her writing, Louise coaches others in sharing their stories and hosts conversations that challenge stigma and silence around mental health and sobriety. Her work resonates with readers and listeners who have lived in the space between outward success and internal struggle. She lives in Colorado with her family, where she continues to write, speak, and advocate for honest conversations about mental illness, recovery, and self-acceptance. Disclaimer: any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome to the show today.
Johnny, thank you so much. You and I have known each other for a really long time, and I'm always so grateful to be able to kind of reconnect with you in this format and to kind of have these conversations together. So thank you for making space today. It means a lot.
No, absolutely. And I really enjoy seeing Louise's content. I'm on a bit of a social media break at the moment, but I can still see stories on Messenger and things like that. I always enjoy, for me, I'm a big fan of realness and people being real. And I think there's quite a lot of not that going on in the world. So when I see Louise, who's actually speaking from experience about what she's experienced, what she's going through, what she's been through in her life, whether it's the bipolar, whether it's relationships, whether it's her story of sobriety and coming to that, it's really, really refreshing. So I know her book has got a lot more of that and realness in it. So I'm actually very excited to hear it. So I got a copy from Louise yesterday. So Louise, I'd love to know what kind of caused you to actually write a book about your story and share this with everyone? Because I imagine it was a bit of a step for you.
A little bit. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't actually sit down to write a book about 4 of my exes. That was never the plan. But what ultimately ended up happening, I was diagnosed in 2015, and then fast forward all the way to 2024, major depression just hit me, like a freight train, seemingly just out of the blue. And that depression took me down for about 8 months. And what was really beautiful about those 8 months was it really forced me to really exist just as me, stripped down. I stopped working, I stopped the podcast, I stopped coaching, I stopped, doing everything that, defines me that you mentioned in the intro, right? And really existed purely as myself. And so what that forced me to do was really dive into profound reflection. And so the book in 2024, it started almost as journal entries, like just my own reflections. And what I noticed as I was beginning that process wasn't these 4 men, but it was the manifestation of my bipolar through the lens of these 4 relationships. So a big piece of my story, in addition to what you might know as bipolar, I'm sure we'll talk about that today, is also a really close relationship with an anxious attachment style and this, fear of abandonment and this desire to always feel safe. And so as I looked at these stories through Marco, through Jim, through Luke, through Patrick, I could see my own story unfold. And so ultimately it just seemed like a really, really smart way to tell the story in a way that is also relatable to anyone, bipolar or not.
No, I love that. It's kind of how it started out as a journal entry and then became a book, and you're reflecting on these relationships with these past men. So if I'm understanding correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, it was kind of like you kind of saw a mirror a little bit of some of the things that are going on.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what I saw a lot of was progression. So bipolar by nature, I think it's a really common misconception that
Mm,
it kind of just like comes out of nowhere and all of a sudden you have this individual who is extremely manic or extremely depressed. That's not the reality. Most
mm,
individuals with bipolar disorder start showing symptoms in their early 20s. And unfortunately, a diagnosis doesn't occur typically until about 10 years later, is the length of time that an individual will go with either a false diagnosis or just no diagnosis at all. And so, what that means is that bipolar is insidious by nature. There is a progression to it. And so, what these stories through these four men do show you is like the early stages of Louise's bipolar disorder. And then, as we go 15 years without a diagnosis and with wrong medications, what that progression ultimately looks like. So, by the time we get to Patrick, we're just in sheer catastrophe.
I've got you. Okay. No, that's interesting how it's sort of what you've explained to us, because it would be great to kind of hear a little bit about bipolar, because like you said, and what it is for you, and kind of how it kind of like shows up, because I know a lot of people would probably anticipate, and I probably would as well in the past, of like thinking it's like one extreme to another. But I'd love to hear it from you a little bit more about what it is.
Yeah. I mean, the best way that I can explain bipolar, maybe to somebody that either doesn't have the baseline knowledge of it or no experience with it, is to use a metaphor. And so the metaphor I use is that of a humming. So imagine just for a second you see a hummingbird and she's beautiful and she's colorful and she's vibrant and she's kind of flying everywhere from place to place and she's chasing nectar and she's chasing nectar. She's really erratic. And imagine now for a moment that we put a blindfold on the hummingbird. And now the hummingbird is just even more frantic and going faster and faster and faster. And eventually that hummingbird, bam, smashes headfirst into an unyielding brick wall and plummets to the ground. And now imagine that there's a raven who's been circling up ahead the entire time. And the raven now swoops down and brings with him a cloak and covers the hummingbird and smothers the hummingbird. So the hummingbird can no longer see, hear, smell, and is trapped and believes in its heart of hearts that it will never escape. And that metaphor is the reality that I lived with for 15 years until ultimately it brought me to a crossroads where I didn't want to make a choice.
Got you. No, that's really good metaphor, or what you use there in terms of the hummingbird. Got it. And you talk about also in the book about like addiction as well, and like overcoming that. Was that, yeah, I'd love to hear, was that kind of something that impacted on your bipolar? Was it kind of like disconnected?
This is like such a common question that I get all the time. And the answer is really personal. But the question is, which came first, right? The addiction or
Mm,
the bipolar, right? It's
mm,
kind of it can be a chicken or an egg question. For me, the answer has always been very, very clear. One thing that's, I guess, more unique about my drinking journey or my addiction story is that for me, substances, I think for a lot of people, they start off as something that maybe is fun or enjoyable or social. For me, that was never the case. It was always an attempt to numb or to hide or to an escape. It was always coming from a much darker place. And so, because of that, I really identify my addiction as being a symptom of my bipolar, not a product of my bipolar, but really a symptom of it. And so, yeah, I mean, I lived all the way, I was diagnosed in 2015 with bipolar disorder, and I was very active in my addictions until 2021 when I finally did get sober. And it's a big piece of what I coach on. It's a big piece of what I talk about on social media, because had I been able to get to a place where I could find my sobriety sooner, I
mm.
would have found peace and stability a lot sooner. But it wasn't until I was finally able to kind of make that choice around my sobriety that I was actually able to even start doing the work to find stability.
So you needed to get the sobriety before, in order to do a lot of that like inner work on yourself.
Yeah, it's a hill I will die on. Not a lot of people like me for saying it, but if you want to find stability and true maintenance of your bipolar disorder, you have to get sober.
Chemicals just in like alcohol and those kind of things. Like I can only imagine like the chemical sort of like going on like in bipolar and you know impact alcohol can have differently to different people, of course.
Yeah.
But like I know for me, just being very
For
honest and
you.
open about it,
Yeah.
it's like I can get severely depressed, and then a week later, if I'm off of it, I can be quite happy and like in life. But yeah, I can only imagine what it does to bipolar with the chemicals in alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. And you know firsthand, like with experimenting with your own sobriety and your own relationship with alcohol,
Mm.
like the impact that that's made for you. So,
Yeah, exactly. It's huge. How was it? What was a journey like on sobriety for you? Was it like it sounded like it was like a decision, but was it easy or was it a challenge?
yeah, I mean, a little bit of both, I suppose. I think nothing in personal growth happens overnight, technically. I had been questioning my own relationship with alcohol since I moved in with my now husband. Him and I met in 2018. Prior to moving in together in 2019, I was a single mom. And I could really do whatever I wanted without any judgment, without anybody seeing what I was doing. And I had gotten myself to a point where I was drinking 2, 3 bottles of wine a night, passing out, blacking out almost every night, and repeating the process every day. So when I met my husband and we moved in a year after dating, it, to use your phrase from earlier, like it really put a mirror to my face, right? Like I no longer could kind of get away with these behaviors, not because he was saying anything to me, he never once said anything to me, but because it became so abundantly clear what I was doing. And so I spent about a year trying to modify my relationship with alcohol, whether that was to only drink during the week or only drink 2 days a week or only drink wine, or there's kind of a list of rules that you can give to yourself, and it was almost more painful to have to control it in that way. And then the actual night I got sober was so uneventful. I mean, it was the middle of COVID. We had found a sitter. We were going out with friends for the night. And I remember saying to my husband, like, I'm going all out tonight. I'm going to get drunk. You're driving. Um, and so we did just that. We went out dinner with friends, had a few martinis, had a few more. And I got home and I said to him, come on, babe, like, let's have one more. Let's have a nightcap. And of course, he never wanted to. And I think he went out onto the patio and I was grabbing him a beer and then I grabbed myself one. And I would always I would chug the first one, throw it away, and then like grab a second one just
Mm.
so he wouldn't see that. And so I went to start chugging this first one, and I remember just spewing it all over the sink. Like it just like came projectiling out of my mouth, and it tasted absolutely rancid. And I remember looking at the bottle and thinking like, what is wrong with this? Like, is it bad? What's going on? And I remember hearing the bubbles fizz and just kind of staring at it and that taste in my mouth. And I knew in that moment that I had just tasted my last sip of alcohol. And that was on May 15th, 2021, and May 16th, 2021. Hungover like I usually was. I kind of got myself upstairs to try to work out and just like couldn't even function, couldn't do anything. And then I remember kind of bolting from that room down to the landing and staring at my husband. And I remember just giving this almost like Tony Award winning performance of my sobriety and just declaring, this is it, no more, I can't do this anymore. And that was the last time I ever tasted alcohol.
Wow. So yeah. So you said you would like drink what the idea was to like drink one and then get another one kind of thing and then yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was just like you had to hide everything. I mean, it was like, okay, if we're going to have a glass of wine with dinner, then I would go out to the garage and chug 2 beers and then come inside and, have the one glass of wine with my husband. So, yeah, you get creative when consumption is what you're chasing.
Got you. No, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, you went like sober. Was it something he did or did he kind of just keep, he was allowed to drink?
No, I mean, my husband not once has ever been one to kind of point fingers. He's never also been a big drinker. Like he's like a once a month type of guy. I think one thing that's really beautiful, like a lot of people will ask me, when did you start to be able to like accept your disorder and, your bipolar and everything like that? And for me, again, like 2015 was the diagnosis. I caused chaos through, 2021. And it was in 2019, me and my now husband sat down to have a talk, and it was before we moved in together. And I thought he was breaking up with me. I thought he wanted absolutely nothing to do with me anymore. My emotions had been extremely erratic, a lot of dysphoric mania, which is really kind of angry and irritable mania. And I remember in that conversation, I said, I'm just going to put everything on the table. I'm just going to tell him everything. And his response to me was to say two things. He said, Louise, I already know. And then he said, I just need you to let me inside. And he tapped me on the head. And that was the first moment. It didn't change everything, but it was the first moment that allowed me to start to believe that maybe I could be loved for everything that I was. And so that conversation not only opened up kind of a new outlook to my bipolar, but also to my relationship with alcohol, twofold, right? Like maybe I can just love myself for everything that I am.
Got you. Oh, beautiful. I'd love to know also the title, obviously, Tainted Love, where that came from.
Well, a lot of people associate it with the song from the 80s.
I'm
Which
thinking
was
that.
that was on my mind. But I mean, ultimately, by the end of the story, I find untainted love, right? The whole story, I'm chasing love externally. I'm chasing it through other people, through other things, even my daughter, even my husband, right? But it's not until you can really get to that point, which I didn't get to until 2024, until I was midway writing this book, of actually saying, like, I'm okay existing simply as me, loving everything that I am.
Got you. Just finding it inside yourself. Do you feel like you could have got to that point if you didn't become sober?
No, absolutely not. There's no possible way. Alcohol clouds your mind in so many ways. And I'm speaking from a perspective of somebody that was addicted to alcohol. I didn't have a relationship with alcohol that could function. I fully recognize that there are individuals out there that, like my husband, right? He can have a beer every so often, maybe once every 2 weeks or so, and that's fine. Do I think that that's clouding his judgment from self-acceptance and things like that? Probably not. But for somebody like me, which is a lot of bipolar individuals, yeah, it's all or nothing. There's no way.
Got you. Sounds like you really had to you found like the real, like, honesty part of yourself when you kind of gave up the alcohol, which can kind of block you, even if it does
Yeah.
give you that temporary dopamine hit and things
Yeah.
like
Well,
that.
and it's so funny because what's interesting is when I first got sober, I met you when I first got sober in 2021, and I was like screaming it from the rooftops. Sobriety, 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 sobriety. I still wasn't talking about bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder was like still my secret, right? And so it did. I think it took like another probably 2 years for me to, because really when I got sober is when I started doing real work, right? I'd been in therapy my whole life, but had I been honest? No. Had I been taking my medication properly? No. Had I been living a healthy lifestyle? No. Had I done any work on emotional regulation? No. Had I done any work on nervous system regulation? No. So in 2021, like it was really, that's when I started doing a lot of these things. And it was really through that process that it became abundantly clear to me that bipolar is my story, and in terms of the community and individuals that I want to impact and serve, everything just clicked into place. Sobriety is part of my story. I very much identify with bipolar as being part of my identity. This is a controversial topic in the bipolar community. Some people don't agree with that, and I agree with whatever you think is right for you. But for me, I very strongly identify as bipolar being part of who I am, right? It's woven into the fabric of my being. It will always be part of me. Whereas sobriety and alcohol is really just like a piece of that story.
I've got you. Yeah. Yeah. I know you shared with me it's like part of like who you are, and coming to terms with that sounds like that was a journey you were on after, particularly the sobriety help, right?
A long one. Bipolar is a full-time job.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kidding yourself if you think it's not. It can feel like a full-time job.
And do you like you're a mum or a wife, or you're writing your book, you got all these responsibilities. Are there kind of like spells? Do you have to kind of do life differently at different like spells when you're experiencing? Because there's people who are like, I'm just thinking people out there, the super achievers, like, I'm going to go hard all the time. Do you have to go in different spells or?
Yeah, I mean, and thank you for asking because yeah, I still get manic. I still get depressed, right? Like I said, that's part of who I am. Does it look like a -1 to an 11 on a, 1 to 10 scale anymore? No, absolutely not. It might look kind of like, I don't know, like a 3 to a 7, right? Um, and so there's a huge part of my life that has just learned to understand what my brain needs, not what it wants, not what makes it comfortable, what it actually needs. For me, I worked my whole life in corporate America, traveling the world. I was in the hospitality industry. I was in a leadership position in a Fortune 100 company. That life is not a possibility for me, right? Even if I wanted to go back to it. Sleep is a non-negotiable for me. I will never get up early to take an early flight or leave on a trip or anything. Like I will never stay late to watch a football match or anything like that. Like sleep is absolutely mandatory for me. So, and a lot of these things fall under lifestyle. And so yeah, I have learned in the past couple years to really define strong boundaries for myself. If guests are coming into town or families coming into town, things like that. And as it relates to the work I do, I'm really fortunate in that over the past 5 years, I have built a sustainable, work that caters to my brain and caters to my ability to give it rest when it needs rest. Now, on the flip side, I also have so many superpowers, right? Like
Mm.
because my brain is the way it is, I have the ability to literally sit at my desk for 6 hours and not move because I'm like so absorbed in whatever project it is that I'm working on. And so it's also this kind of delicate balance of like when you find yourselves in those periods of mania or hypomania, like how can you actually lean into that so that you're creating good and so that it is a superpower of yours? And same with depression or depressive thoughts. Like, how can you lean into those periods of your life to have that profound reflection? If we resist or push back on either of those sides of the spectrum, that's when we're going to get that friction. And that's when things are going to feel wrong. So it's a delicate dance, but I have learned to kind of lean in when appropriate.
It sounds like there's a lot of self-awareness and what's needed for you and boundary. Like your example, you talked about the corporate America leadership flying around the world is just not sustainable. But that's not generalizing to everyone. Again, that's just like for you and understanding you
Yeah.
as a key one. I'm with you on the sleep as well because I'm not a fan of the you can survive on 5 hours sleep. I'm like, no, I can't. Mood changes
Exactly.
massively and brain fog for me. And that's just like me, not experiencing bipolar, but again, like, and other people can have less sleep. So I
Yeah.
love the way you're really catering to you and
Yeah.
what you need
Yeah.
specifically, which is really important.
Circadian rhythms are tied very closely to bipolar cycling. And what's interesting is when time changes, so November and March, you'll see an influx of bipolar mania and depressive episodes just because of that 1 hour time difference for the majority of the world that goes through that.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so yeah, I mean it's really as delicate as something as that like 1 hour time change.
Oh wow, just that one out. It's amazing. For you mentioned a couple of things, well, a few things, but like, sleep, which we just talked about, boundaries being really, really key. I'm sure there's many things and it might vary, but is there anything in particular that's really supported you with your bipolar?
Yeah. I'm a big cheerleader of something called dialectical behavioral therapy. Dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT as you might see it called, is a therapy that was originally created by Marshall Linehan for borderline personality disorder, which is a personality disorder. Bipolar disorder is a mood disorder. We'll get into those differences in another episode in another day. But ultimately, this therapy is something that teaches a specific set of skills on kind of four different areas, but one of them in particular is emotional regulation. Emotional regulation has been something my whole life that has been incredibly challenging for me. Once I was diagnosed and medicated, and I still, struggled so much with relationships and communication, and ultimately would still continue to damage relationship after relationship. When I was introduced to this therapy in 2022, it changed so much for me. I still struggle with emotional regulation, but now I have a toolbox basically that's filled, that allows me to do my best, right? I'm not perfect. I still mess up all the time, but it like all starts with that awareness. And so that is something that I think a lot of individuals with bipolar don't know about, that resource, haven't heard of it, because it's typically, prescribed, for BPD versus BP. And so as anytime anyone asks me like, hey, what can I do more of, or what can I do? I'm really struggling, like, because I hear a lot like, hey, I don't get it. I'm diagnosed. I take my medicine. I go to therapy, but I just still like struggle every day in communication and relationships and everything like that. And that is usually coming down to our ability to regulate our emotions.
And DBT was like a powerful one on you. Yeah. So what was the moment, just going back to it again, that you decided to start talking about your bipolar? Because obviously we talked about the sobriety in 2021, and you were sharing that very loudly, and that really helped you.
Yeah.
What kind of caused you to start talking about the bipolar?
That's a good question. I remember a moment, it would have been, and I remember we were going for a hike, me and my husband, and it was kind of one of these conversations where, as an entrepreneur, you kind of like have these conversations constantly with yourself of like, what am I doing? This isn't working. Like, like, what should I be doing? And you're kind of like constantly evaluating yourself. And it was my husband that says, I don't think you should do anything. Actually, I'm going to change the timeline because it was after my depression. So it would have been like late 2024, when I was starting to think about like kind of getting back into things. And he said, I don't think you should do anything. He said, I think you should write the book. In quotes, the book is something that I've wanted to do, for a decade. And people have told me, oh, you should write your story, you should write your story. But it's always just an idea, right? Until you start writing. And yeah, he said, school was getting started. And so our daughter was going back to school. And he's like, I don't think you should do anything. I think you should start writing the book. And I love my husband, and he's usually right about these sorts of things. And so I started writing the book. And this process of uncovering my experience has been the most profound understanding I've had of myself and my disorder. And it started to feel natural to just start sharing, snippets of my journey. Like if you go to any of my social medias, like I like to talk about the gray area of things. I like to acknowledge that there is no right or wrong or this way or that way, right? Like there is this lived experience that we can come together communally to understand. And so that's what I do on my page, is just, hey, this is my experience. It might not be yours, right? But I'm pretty sure if we put all of ours together, we'll create understanding. So yeah, it's been pretty cool to kind of see it unravel in a much more like natural, organic way than I think I had been pushing in previous projects.
Interesting. It sounded like writing the book was kind of a way of expressing it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And understanding.
Yeah. And I didn't realize it was, I started writing the book for me. Like there was never, I don't want to say never, but it wasn't like purpose was for me, to put it simply. And then as you kind of get deeper and deeper and more people get their eyes on it, and eventually I do things pretty all or nothing. So I started taking a ton of writing courses and really just immersing myself in the experience. And it became abundantly clear that this book was becoming something.
I love that. Kind of, I've heard that before, and I think writing a book myself, that's very true for me as well. Like you sort of get stuff out, and it's kind of like for you, almost therapeutic. I found it in a certain way, just getting it out, like talking to my therapist. It was just writing a book, basically.
Yeah. Well, and I think like anybody that has lived experience, bipolar or not, there's periods of our life that you don't remember as well, or you've hidden under carpets, or, and so to really force my mind to like go places that I had very intentionally decided I would never go again was the most intense exposure therapy I've ever had. But now, kind of on the other side of it, like that's where the healing happens, right? That's where the untainted love comes, is through that. So there's definitely a few villains in this story that I've harbored, hatred for years. And the process of writing those stories has allowed me to kind of release that, right? That like radical acceptance.
Interesting. I know you talk about past relationships in there as well. How was that for you writing?
It's been interesting. So there's 4 past relationships in the story. I can't give any spoiler alerts, of course, but I have been in touch with 2 of the 4 of them, and I have significant updates from the other 2 of the 4. One interesting, I think in some ways there's what we might, if we think of an old ex, like unfinished business, right? Like that was never tied up, or that we never finished that. So I feel like with Marco, that story was finished, right? By being able to reconnect. With Luke, that Luke has its own set of complex chapters. He's the biological father of my daughter, so it's a very complex relationship, and he's read the book, and for him it gave him understanding. He had no idea. He thought that my personality was just fun and exuberant and joyous for life. He didn't realize what he was witnessing was mania, right? And so it really gave him some understanding, and both of us some peace as well. So that was really special. And then Patrick, I cannot give any spoilers on Patrick.
Read the
It's
book.
just too good.
Read the book.
Read the book.
I'm looking forward to listening to it as I go through it as well. So it should be good. That's awesome. There's so much in the book, I guess, like Louise's story, but also, there's the insight into her experience with bipolar, which is obviously a key message. And whether do you feel like was there anyone you were particularly aiming for with this book when you're sharing it?
In terms of audience, you mean?
Yeah, audience wise.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I talk to so many people that find it very relatable. I think women in general, most of my audience, about 60%, 65% of my audience are females. Because the book takes place when I'm age 21, it appeals to almost like a coming of age audience as well. I'm 43 now, but the book, is 20 years old. So it does appeal to kind of a coming of age audience. And my hope and desire and goal for the book is, obviously I want people to feel seen, heard, listened to, but ultimately if somebody can read this and suffer a little bit less than I did, then like that's job done for me.
Got it. Yeah. It sounds like even if you don't challenge a bit, it opens up an awareness to people on another level. Whether you know someone with bipolar or you don't, it's just that kind of added level of awareness really for people.
Yeah, and thank you. Yeah, I mean that's so much of it is this nuanced experience of bipolar disorder, because Hollywood, while the movies are great, it does not paint an accurate picture, right? Like it paints this very extreme, and there are extremes that, don't get me wrong, but like in the day to day, I think for people to read this and understand that nuanced version of bipolar can be really powerful in terms of earlier diagnosis, preventing, manic and depressive episodes and things like that if we start just paying attention a little bit more.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Hollywood tends to be entertainment, so it would be the
There's a
extreme
couple good
dramatics
ones out there, but for the most part, it's just like, whoa, that's not what it's like.
No, it's good. Like I said at the start, it's really good to kind of get that realness in the world and actual experience of someone sharing something that they've been through, not read about, and then writing about it. So that's really good that you're getting your message out to the world. So Louise, as we sort of wrap up today, I'd love to know, where is the best place to find this book, and maybe reach out to you, find out more about your work. I know you do a few things, and is there maybe a final word or message you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, thank you. LouiseBarnett.com has it all. That's got socials, my coaching, everything I do, the book itself. The book will be published on October 2026, depending on when you're listening to this. So it is available for pre-sale right now on Amazon. And then once it's published, it'll be available widely. And I encourage you to join us on the socials. We have a lot of fun there. I post a ton of content, and I like to take your questions and your feedback. So I have a weekly newsletter where I'll answer your questions. I have a live coaching community where it's completely anonymous. You get to show up under an alias name, and I just answer your questions and, coach on something really practical and, obviously give you a skill that you can walk away with. So that's some of the fun things that we're doing. I highly encourage checking out the 6 pillars to bipolar regulation. So we talked about them in our conversation today, but in terms of really like finding a peaceful life with bipolar disorder, you're really looking at 6 things. You're looking at medication, therapy, sobriety, lifestyle, nervous system regulation, and emotional regulation. So I have a little free guide that you can grab on my website to that as well. I really want anybody who's listening to this, whether you have just been diagnosed, whether you have been diagnosed for a long time, whether you're just somebody who knows somebody who's bipolar and you're wanting to know more so that you can support, please know that the direction you're going in and what you're doing is right. It's not linear. Sometimes growth and change can feel like you're taking 2 steps back and only 1 step forward, but keep showing up, keep surrounding yourself by the right kind of support. Sometimes that doesn't always mean that is our given family. Sometimes that means found family. And for me, that's something that has been incredibly powerful, is to find my people, find my found family. And that has really led me to a place where I am today. But I love to hear from everybody. I read all my emails, all my DMs. I answer them all. So I would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for hosting me, Johnny.
Amazing. So yeah, you heard Louise about community. I back that as well. And Louise has certainly got resources and support for anyone going through their challenges of bipolar or know someone who is. So please check out Louise's website. That'll be linked in the show notes below this, including where you can grab the book. That's going to be a very, very exciting read, as I mentioned. So Louise, a big thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much. It is always so nice to see you, Johnny. Thank you so much for hosting.
Absolutely. So that concludes today's episode. And remember to share your voice by leading with your heart and not with fear.